Look, the world of work is changing faster than ever, and it's all because of AI. So the real question is, how do you build a career that doesn't just survive, but actually thrives in all this chaos? Well, we've got a 3-step roadmap that's going to give you some real clarity. Let's dive right in.
Let's just kick things off with a quote that should really stop you in your tracks. David Patterson, who's a total pioneer in computer architecture, says that by 2026, that's not far away, the top AI will be smarter than 99.9% of humans. Just let that sink in for a second.
And I know what you might be thinking. That's just hype, right? Well, Elon Musk's response to that was just 2 words, roughly correct. You know, when 2 of the biggest and brightest minds in tech agree on something this massive, it's probably time to start paying very close attention.
And this isn't some far-off theoretical problem. Nope. The impact is already here. We're seeing traditional career paths facing this huge chasm. Employability for recent graduates is actually dropping. And it's not because people aren't smart. It's because the skills that companies desperately need are changing so incredibly fast, creating these massive gaps that AI is just perfectly designed to fill.
So that brings us to the big one. The question probably on your mind right now, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, or even 40s. With the ground literally shifting under our feet, what's the plan? How do you actually build a career that's built to last? The good news is there is a roadmap.
Okay, so first things first. Before we do anything, we have to understand the market's golden rule. This is like the fundamental principle that decides why you get paid what you get paid. And it doesn't matter what your job is. You know, it all boils down to something really simple. Businesses have problems. Big, expensive problems they need to solve. Things like getting more customers, building better products, finding the right talent. Your salary, your career growth, it's all directly tied to how well you can solve their most critical, most painful problems.
But here's the thing, that most important problem, it's always changing. Think back to 2015. It was all about building apps and websites, so software engineers were kings. Then, fast forward to 2020, and the big problem was customer acquisition, which sparked the whole creator economy boom. And today, it's all about AI integration. Businesses are desperate to automate everything.
So what this really shows us is a kind of timeless formula for career success. You find a huge business demand, and then you develop the rare skills needed to meet that demand. When those 2 things come together, that's where you find exponential rewards. That's the sweet spot. That's where you want to live.
All right, so if that's the goal, how do you actually get there? Well, that brings us to our very first step. You have to master value. And this isn't just about being busy or doing a lot of tasks. It's about creating a tangible, measurable impact that the business can see.
See, value isn't just one thing. It's really made up of 4 different parts. First, there's value creation. That's the actual work you do. Then there's value importance. How much does that work actually matter to the company's bottom line? Third is value communication. Can you prove your impact, ideally with numbers tied to revenue? And finally, there's value capture, and that's your paycheck. Mastering this whole cycle is the real key.
And this isn't just theory. This is exactly what's possible when you get this right. Just look at the story of Banu Tia. This guy left a really good job and, working all by himself from a small village, built a profitable AI company. Why? Because he could do it all. He could build the thing, he could sell the thing, and he could create the systems to make it run. He mastered the entire value chain.
Okay, so being able to create value is absolutely crucial, but it's only half the equation. Where you choose to apply those amazing skills is just as critical. And that brings us to step 2, figuring out where the real growth is and making the right bets on the right opportunities.
Now, this is probably going to sound a little counterintuitive, but the biggest, life-changing opportunities, they're often not at those huge, stable, fancy corporations. They're at the small, fast-moving startups trying to shake things up. And if you do join one, you have to fight for ESOPs, employee stock options. It's the only way you get to own a real piece of the pie you're helping to bake.
All right, let's paint a picture here. Imagine 2 people, Kiran and Krishna. Kiran plays it safe. He hops between big companies, gets a steady 15% raise each time, but eventually his salary just kind of flatlines. Then you have Krishna. He takes a massive risk on a startup. He gets a salary, sure, but also a huge chunk of stock options, knowing full well it has a tiny, tiny chance of actually succeeding. Okay, so let's play this out. Scenario A. The startup absolutely crushes it. The high-risk bet pays off in a spectacular way. The company either gets bought for a ridiculous amount of money or it goes public.
I mean, this is the lottery ticket moment, right? Just think about Flipkart. By 2014, something like 400 of their employees became millionaires. Why? Because they had stock in a company that just exploded in value. That is the kind of life-changing potential we're talking about with a successful bet.
Okay, I can hear you now. That's the 1 in a million shot. And you're right. So what happens in the much, much more likely scenario? Scenario B. The startup burns through its cash and goes bust in a couple of years. So in this case, yeah, Krishna's stock is worth 0. A big fat nothing. But, and this is the most important part, look at what else he gained. The experience is off the charts. So, was it a failed bet? Absolutely not. And this is the critical point that almost everyone misses.
And that right there leads us perfectly into our third and final step, compounding your experience. Because even when one of these startup bets doesn't pay off in cash, the experience you walk away with becomes your single most valuable asset. You just have to know how to use it.
Think about it like this. The speed at which you learn is totally different. In a big corporation, you get really good at solving a very narrow set of problems over a long time. At the right startup, you're thrown into the deep end every single day, forced to learn incredibly fast. 1 year of that intense experience can easily be worth 3, maybe even 4 years at a slower company. That's how your experience compounds on itself.
But of course, that raises the big question, right? You can't just jump from startup to startup hoping for the best. Taking calculated bets is smart, but knowing when to stay in the right bet for the long haul, that's critical. So, how do you know when you found a bet worth sticking with?
Well, here are 3 really simple signs to look for. Think of it as your checklist. First, is the founding team just absolutely exceptional? Do they know their industry inside and out? Second, does your specific role have a direct, meaningful impact on the main business metrics? And third, and this is a big one, are you still learning at a crazy pace? If you can say a big yes to all 3 of those, you've probably found a rocket ship worth holding on to.
So, when you boil it all down, thriving in this new AI era isn't about one single thing. It's about a combination. You have to master the skills of creating value, which is all about building and distributing. And then you need the strategy to bet on the right high-growth opportunities and compound your experience by sticking with the winners. The question I'll leave you with is, what's going to be your next bet?